It has been probably a good couple of months since I last discussed Asahi Linux. As a quick refresher, this is the project to get Linux running on the Apple Silicon. They've been plodding along, making new drivers, new user space tools, improving that stuff, and slowly getting things upstreamed. And very recently, this article came out from ZDNet. Linux 6.2, the first mainstream Linux kernel for Apple M1 chips arrive. Linux is now ready to run on modern Macs. That sounds great. It makes it sound like if you download the next version of Ubuntu, the next version of Fedora, a newer kernel on Arch Linux, you can just run it on Apple Silicon, no problem whatsoever. Now, I generally like ZDNet, at least as like a surface level look or at general tech stuff, so you know something's kinda happening. But sometimes the articles aren't super great. So from about here to here, as in the parts where it's not talking about the work being done with Asahi Linux, article's great. Besides that, though, there are some pretty serious problems. This article is very bad, and that's not just me saying this is what the Asahi Linux team had to say. This article is misleading and borderline false. You will not be able to run Ubuntu nor any other standard distro with 6.2 on any M1 Mac. Please don't get your hopes up. So then, what's so wrong about it? Surely this is just hyperbole, is not that big of a deal, it's like a misused word, a misused term, where it seems correct if you're a tech journalist, but if you're really involved in the field, it obviously is wrong. Well, let's start with the title. Get out of my way. Linux 6.2, the first mainstream Linux kernel for Apple M1 chips arrives. This isn't even like a clickbaity kinda wrong. This is just blatantly disregarding reality. As said by the Asahi Linux team, we are continuously upstreaming kernel features, and 6.2 notably adds device trees and basic boot support for M1 Pro, Macs, and Ultra machines. This can very clearly be seen with a tiny bit of research. This is from the Asahi Linux documentation about feature support. This tells you when different features were upstreamed, when they were involved in Asahi Linux, and where exactly they are in their stage of development. And it is absolutely true that things were added in 6.2, like CPU frec and all of the other things that were mentioned in that tweet. But what about the features merged in 6.1? How about 5.19, 5.18, 5.17, 5.16, going all the way back to the earliest things being upstreamed, 5.13, released the end of June 2021. In this supposed mainstream Linux kernel that's now ready to run on modern Macs, they haven't upstreamed the trackpad and keyboard drivers. There's other things like, say, the webcam driver, I can't spell webcam, the webcam driver, or the 3.5mm jack, or a bunch of other stuff that some cases haven't even been started yet on some of the models. In no world do you see a feature table that looks like this, with so many things that need to be worked on and so many things that need to be upstreamed, where you can say, this is mainstream ready. It's so far from that. This is for developers and people who know exactly what they're doing with Linux. This is not for just your regular average Linux user to just slap on a machine and expect it to be good for daily driving with everything. Not to say you can't daily drive, I know some people will, but it's not ready for just your average person yet. And later in the article it says, today, this support is finally ready for mainline Linux users. Of course, it's all experimental at this point. I would call some of it non-existent, but sure, we'll go with experimental, but it won't be for much longer. Linux 6.2 is expected to become Ubuntu 23.04's default kernel. True, and to be included in Fedora 38 before the late April release of 6.3. Also true. But let's just assume, okay? This is so far from true, but let's just assume that all of these features had been upstreamed. Every single kernel feature was already in the kernel, was already done, and already working with no bugs whatsoever. Even then, you would still not be able to just go and install Linux on an M1 Mac and have it work. Our goal is to upstream everything, but that doesn't mean distros instantly get Apple Silicon support. As with many other platforms, there is some integration work required. Distros need to package our user space tooling and at this time offer 16K kernels. So the most obvious thing with this tooling is the bootloader. So Asahi Linux doesn't just use your regular old Linux bootloader, whether that's Grub, Systemd Boot, Refined, anything else out there you might care about. It uses its own custom bootloader. This is called M1N1. Ignore the fact that it has M1 in its name. It's for both the M1, M2, anything else that comes out in the future, Pro, Ultra, Max, Deluxe. Is Deluxe a real one? I don't know. It's the bootloader for the Apple Silicon. Does your distro ship this? In many cases, it probably doesn't. There's maybe like a handful of exceptions. I know that Manjaro does, but I can't think of really many others. It's probably in the AUR as well, but is it on Ubuntu? Is it on Fedora? I don't know. It probably isn't. Does it ship all of the other Asahi Linux tooling as well? Is that tooling updated for your specific hardware variant? Let's say we have the M1 and M2 support, and then the M3 comes out, and you go and buy one. Has your distro updated the packages for the M3 support that's obviously going to change at least a bit? Is that support even worked on yet? Maybe, maybe not. Is your distro installer set up to actually install onto these M1 and M2 systems? Does it have an option to use the M1N1 bootloader, or do you have to go and manually set everything up yourself? All of these questions and much more need to be answered before out-of-the-box use is going to be available. As for 16K kernels, this refers to a page size of 16K. Now over on the macOS side, it can use dynamic page sizes. If it needs a 4K page, if it needs a 16K page, it can just swap it as it needs to. On Linux, it is either 4K pages or 16K pages. What exactly a page is doesn't really matter for today's video. The important thing is right now, it needs to be a 16K kernel for the support that is available to be working. In the future, once 4K kernel builds are somewhat usable, you can expect zero integration distros to somewhat work on these machines, i.e. some hardware will work, but not all or only partially. This should be sufficient to add a third-party repo with the integration packages. According to the Asahi Linux team, no generic ARM64 distro ships 16K kernels today. This might be wrong, there might be one out there, and I'm sure someone is going to leave it in the comment section down below. Now, with all that being said, it doesn't mean that mainline distro support isn't going to be happening. But for out-of-the-box hardware support, distros will need to work with us to get everything right. Unlike Manjaro, when they shipped a kernel that I think that kernel could brick systems or destroy some hardware, if I'm not mistaken. Either way, they tried shipping a kernel that was not ready to be shipped. We are already working with some, and we expect to announce official Apple Silicon support for a mainstream distro in the near future. Just not quite yet. I'm very curious what distro this is going to be, and when it does happen, know for a fact that I'm absolutely going to cover it. Now, this part of the article wasn't mentioned in the tweets, but is by far my absolute favorite part. Fortunately, Asahi Linux, with brilliant software engineer Alyssa Rosenzweig, was up to the challenge. The challenge being getting Linux running on the Apple Silicon. But I know what this is implying. It's implying that Alyssa is leaner. Now, Alyssa does do really great work, has done great work on things like Mesa, has done great work getting involved in Asahi Linux. But Alyssa is not leaner. They are two separate people. I don't know how people can be so wrong about this for so long. They literally held a talk together at XDC 2022. They were talking at the same time. They are not the same person. I know there are some people out there who are really obsessed with who is the person behind the VTuber, but Alyssa is not Lena. They are not the same person. Stop. Now, if it was just this one ZDNet article, that would be one thing. But there are outlets out there that treat this article and treat ZDNet generally as if they are doing first-hand reporting, as if they know exactly what's going on. Like 9to5Mac, that reported M1 Mac Linux 6.2 support for MacBook Air, MacBook Pro, Mac Studio, Mac Mini, and literally used ZDNet as a source. At least they acknowledge that Alyssa is possibly a different person from Lena. It was also reported by TechRadar. Linux kernel 6.2 is here, and it now has mainline support for Apple M1 chips. Good news for Apple enthusiasts. No. Stop. Stop reporting what ZDNet reports as if it is always the truth. Do your own research. Don't just report what other outlets are reporting. Now, I do want to give credit where credit is due, because other outlets actually did report properly. Macworld, for example, has a pretty tame article. I still don't know why these articles need to exist. Nothing special happened with 6.2. There was an article also from Apple Insider, which frames it in a better way, and also from Joey Snedden over at OMG Linux. Linux now officially supports Apple Silicon. Well, kind of. It's still, kind of misleading, but it's your normal clickbait, not just straight up lying about the state of the software. And this is exactly why I typically list out my sources in the description. If you think I'm wrong about something, if you think I'm lying about something, if you think I'm making something up, please just have a look at what I'm seeing, and please correct me if I'm actually wrong. If I'm not wrong and you're lying, I'm gonna ban you. So try me. Yeah. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Do you think it's really dumb that outlets like this put out articles that are just complete nonsense, making it seem like something way bigger is happening than it really is? Do you think it's not that big of a deal? Do you think everybody should just go and do their own research and it's just never a problem, full stop? Let me know your thoughts down below. And if you like the video, go and like the video. And if you really like the video and you want to become one of these amazing people over here, go check out my Patreon, Scribe, Sully, Pay, linked down below. That's going to be it for me, and bye-bye.